let's go ahead and I'm going to kick this off and start by going ahead and bringing all of our amazing speakers back on stage. And I will start off with Alex. He's the first one that I see to my right on screen. So I will go ahead and pass it over and let these amazing folks go ahead and introduce themselves.
Yeah, so I'm Alex. I'm the founder of Marketing Examine. Before that, I was at The Hustle right before we got acquired by HubSpot, which Christopher is in that ecosystem. From there, I joined Gumroad as their head of marketing and helped launch kind of like their newsletter and really get an understanding of this, just like the creator economy, and then also understanding how that is now kind of transitioning into the B2B space. And then joined the Collective, which is a specific facility here in Austin, a big, like, you think of Equinox and Soho House, like if those two had a baby, that is Collective. So I was there for a while as their CMO, and then Marketing Examine was picking up steam, and it was time to kind of just start building, build the media empire and build out our media companies. So that's what we're going to be talking about here, is just all the possibilities with media and B2B influencers, and I'll pass it on. I don't know if you guys want me to pass the torch, but I got Alexis to my right, so I'll pass it there.
Okay, awesome. Hey, everybody. I'm Alexis Scott. I am the co-founder of a new marketing agency called Verbatim. Verbatim is focused on demand gen and content strategy. And then we have an entire wing of our agency that's actually called Influenced by Verbatim, and it specializes in LinkedIn influencer marketing. So what a perfect conversation. This is my first event for Verbatim, so I'm very, very excited to be here. But I am also a LinkedIn influencer / creator myself. And fun fact about me and Rev Genius, I was actually in the original DM thread when Jared had this idea. So I was one of the like 10 or 11 or 15 people that he was speaking to about this crazy idea that he had. And look where we are now.
Hi, I'm Daniel Helfman, and I'm the moderator today, but we're also going to self-moderate, and so that's great. I work with Alex at Marketing Examined, and we're super excited to talk to you about B2B influencers. I want to send it over next to Chris, because he is, like the others, he's also an influencer with an agency. So Chris, you want to share your background and your skills?
Happy to. I have some influence. It's not a core competency personally. I just love helping people. My name is Christopher Nault. Everybody knows me as Chris at Growth. I have a long history with influence back in the B2C brands with Red Bull and Jack Daniels. And I've moved into the B2B space for the last 4 years. And I've been really encouraged seeing how much evolution has happened within our universe with this stuff. So hopefully I can add some flair to the conversation.
Awesome. Thanks, Chris. I know you can add some flair. I have no doubt. So my first question for the panel, and we'll start with you, Alexis, is what would you say are the upsides of B2B influencers? And so our audience is represented primarily by SaaS companies, right? And so what's the upside? And then can you share a couple examples? And after you, we'll go to Alex and then Chris.
Yeah, I mean, I think ultimately, in my humble opinion, I mean, there's a lot of upsides. It's very hard to pick just one. I'm going to pick the one where your influencer already has credibility and trust with their audience. So the vessel by which you are disseminating your message is a trusted vessel. And so that message is being processed a lot differently than it would be than perhaps an ad per se. An example of this, I mean, I work with brands all the time for B2B marketing. And, I think that they see the results of my posts either through, tracked links or through purchases. Some are transactional purchases, and there's a tracking component to that as well. But I think that if you compare like average CPM cost for an influencer and you compare it for an ad, that right there is like the logical, like, why influencers.
Yep, that's good upside. Alex, what's your take?
Yeah, I think like we've seen this in the B2C world and the DTC world and like the creative world, that influencers build bridges. They build bridges to monetization, to products. And that's such a powerful thing when that bridge is built on trust. I don't remember exactly what I was reading not long ago, but it was like honestly, like people hate to consume ads, yet we want to pour all of our money into ads instead of pouring money into people who, for a living, create trust with an audience, right? And so, I mean, just with the B2B influencer route, it's like that's all they do. Their entire life and their entire what they focus on revolves around creating meaningful content, building a meaningful relationship, and then downstream being able to monetize and help other brands build strong customer base and strong audiences, et cetera. But
Alex, we lost your audio.
I'll pick up. How's that sound?
Go ahead, Chris. Thank you.
A lot of good things happening with B2B influence. The space is still pretty new. I really appreciate where Alexis is coming from the trust factor. Another fun, kind of interesting part is being able to create content that actually shows the product in use. You know, from a marketing standpoint, these brands have to hit you with a prop statement, a positioning statement that brings it home what the end goal is, right? However, sometimes you see this beautiful statement, you get excited, but there's a lot of pieces that are involved. One of my favorite things is seeing the influencers create and show their work. Big win. You can learn some execution hacks at the same time.
That's great. The Chris, one follow-up question for you. Do you have a specific example you want to share?
Well, Alex called it out. I do own a HubSpot Solutions partner agency, so I'm always very impressed when partners and even customers of HubSpot are sharing new updates and changes and literally recording a loom with the work in the background. And some of them don't label themselves as influencers, but they do have influence. It's a lot of fun to see.
Yep, that's great. That's a great example. I got one more question, and then I'm hoping Alex will come back, but I also see we have great questions from the audience. So my next question is, and I'll start with you again, Alexis. What would you say are the challenges of working with B2B influencers? I mean, we want to sort of touch on the double-edged sword in the title of this panel. And do you have some examples to share?
Well, I think Carrie actually just asked a great question, which is potentially that double-edged sword, right? What if they have a controversial post or something that goes against your brand? And I think that we'll get into why that's kind of, what's the word, like preventable to a certain degree, right? Like as you're choosing your creators and influencers. But I think the other is, it comes down to identifying your goals, and sometimes tracking the effect of influencer marketing can be challenging. And so if your goals are not clearly defined, it can be hard to show like what exactly happened from your relationship with this influencer. And I think that's a common miss for brands.
Yep.
It's like they get so excited about doing this, and then they're like, okay, well then like, why did we do this? What happened? Well, a lot probably happened, but if you weren't tracking and you weren't aware of what your goals were, it becomes very hard to show the impact.
Yep. Alex, do you want to go next?
I didn't hear the question. I just got back into the. You gotta follow me in. I was over here trying to figure out why my Wi-Fi went out.
That's okay. So the question is, Alex, what are the challenges or the downsides of working with B2B influencers? So we want to sort of touch on the double-edged sword in the title of the panel.
Yeah, I think one of the hard parts is like you work with a B2B influencer and you're excited because look, this person's built an audience. They've done a great job of building trust and doing that. And then we try to fit them in a box instead of giving them a box, but letting them be as creative within that box as possible. You know, and I think that's one of the biggest downsides. Like you try to give somebody who's made a living creating content and creating valuable content, you try to limit like their creativity with your guidelines instead of just giving like here's what, like a little bit of advice, but you do you be you, and you help us get to where we need to be. But yeah, that's like one of the downsides is just the box that they try to put a creator or B2B influencer in.
So I want to ask you a quick follow-up question, and Chris, you're going to get a chance to answer this too.
Deal.
Is there a way that a B2B brand could give you a creative brief where you, as a B2B influencer, they're sort of putting some parameters and constraints, right? Like They don't want you to go crazy, but they want you to do something that's unique and that will resonate with your audience. Let's say you're 183,000 followers on Twitter. Maybe we're going to get you a few more today.
So I look at like Ridge Wallet. Ridge Wallet does a phenomenal job at this. Like we recently wrote about them, and when they work with an influencer, and they've worked with over again, not B2B, but they've worked with over 5,000 influencers. They have a very simple criteria that they give them. And it's like, look, we need you to show the link. We need you to promote your discount, your landing page. And then the main thing is you create what your audience loves. Outside of that, there are no other guidelines, like other than like talk about the value prop, but like it is completely up to the influencer to create the content that they know will resonate, and let them be creative with like, okay, these are the pain points that this software solves. Let me figure out how to tell that story and create that narrative and create the magnet that attracts that person to this company. So that's my thoughts there.
Perfect. Thank you. Chris, do you want to jump in with an answer? And I don't know, I'm not trying to lead your answer, but I don't know if you want to touch on Apollo, since you've also done some influencing for them on LinkedIn, I've seen, and I know you're on their board.
Thank you. Great plug. First, I'm going to answer the question. So the negatives is the unrealistic expectation setting. So by working with an influencer, please remember it's part of a campaign and should be a part of a larger play. One post, one time is not going to be the cure of your pipeline woes. You need to create consistency in your marketing practices, and that consistency should also have iteration as a part of the process. That includes any level of B2B influencer, any program when it comes to marketing. So the double-edged sword is there's still a lot of accountability, and with it being new, the marketer, it's on them to supply the tools to allow the creator to make the campaign successful, in my opinion.
Yep, no, that's great, Chris. I want to take a question from the audience here, and I have a question here that's, what will be the future of B2B awareness in your opinion, as it relates to B2B influencers? So Alexis, do you want to go first, and then we'll go around?
Yeah, I mean, I think right now, and let me preface this with LinkedIn is my channel, right? So like it's the channel where I am an influencer. It's also a channel where my company builds influencer marketing programs, works with influencers. So when I'm speaking about this brand awareness, that's the channel in which I'm speaking. I believe it is like the bud is here, right? Like it is so ready to just open up and really become the wave of what's happening. And we're starting to see it. In fact, I have noticed an uptick of creators that I follow where I'm reading their post and then I get to, and that's why I use whatever. And I'm like, oh, okay, so this is where we're going with it. So, you know, we're starting to see it happen more and more, but I think that from a B2B perspective, it's really interesting because when I think of B2B, you know, let's say SaaS, we're here, you know, for RevCon in particular, they're not necessarily transactional solutions. So it will be very interesting to see what happens from that long tail kind of sales cycle of how the brand is, again, tracking metrics, tracking the influence and that brand awareness, and then correctly applying it to that particular campaign or influencer. So I think it's about to explode, in my humble opinion.
Yeah, Alex, do you want to go next?
Yeah, I think it's going to change from the standpoint of it's two things for me. One, I think there's going to be more of an approach of like B2C, like how are you creating YouTube shows? How are you creating different, like very entertaining pieces of content, and not so much like what we think of when we think of like B2B media, like who's creating like the Hot Ones version for B2B, or I don't know if you guys have ever seen like Kevin Hart's Cold as Balls, but like who is creating these kinds of media where like it is the best 15 minutes of your life. Like you're looking forward to sitting down and like learning from your favorite founder, but it's also very exciting and engaging. I also think like just the personality is going to change, like adding actual personality to a lot of the B2B media, specifically on the video side. And then because of that, I think you'll see a lot more campaigns created through that influencer, whereas it's very multi-touch campaigns through email, through video, through social channels, but they'll give the keys to an influencer and let them create the campaign and then work backwards and map out the goals and kind of reverse engineer that way.
That's great. Before we go to Chris, I want to explain one thing. In case not everyone knows, Hot Ones is a YouTube show specifically about hot sauces, and it really took off during COVID. So we're in Austin, which is a very big hot sauce city. So that's what he's referring to there. Chris, you want to go next?
I just got some studio space in Monterey so I can bring people on hikes in Big Sur and record founders and people talk. So shameless plug if anyone's interested, let me know. And I got thinking about Hot Ones got me completely distracted. What is the question that I need to answer?
The question is from someone on in the audience. They're asking, what will be the future of B2B awareness in your opinion? And so where's it going for like SaaS companies?
Sure. I mean, as far as awareness goes, this leads right into my previous conversation, which is this needs to be a piece of a much larger puzzle. Demonstrating what your software does and how it impacts the user is really, really important, and finding fun and unique ways to grab attention so your company even has the ability to do that is not only important, it's foundational. Alex, when he points out what has made some of his examples successful, he talks about infrastructure. We're all in this SaaS space. Things like landing pages and UTM tracking codes are second nature. So lean into those tools and basically give them everything they need to be successful. So there's no, I didn't know I couldn't do that situation at the end.
That's great. Thanks, Chris. I want to grab another question here that's been upvoted a lot from the audience. And it's from Jared Robin, who we all know, the co-founder of Rev Genius. And he's saying, I'm seeing a lot of mediocrity in managing B2B relationships. I agree with this statement. And so he's like, how can we help B2B brands and make sure that they're more organized? And it might be, well, again, I want to start with you, Alexis. It might be, Chris, you might be leaning on your B2B background and talk about some of the tools y'all utilized when you worked with Red Bull and others. But at first, I'll let Alexis have a crack at this.
Okay, well, hold on a second, though, because now I can't see Chris and Alex lost connection. I'm just wondering what's going on here.
I'm here.
Okay.
Chris is back.
Fabulous.
You're not alone.
Oh, and he has no audio. Okay, well, here we go. So can you repeat the question? Because I was so distracted by what was going on. I'm sorry.
That's fine. That's not the question comes from the audience, and it's from Jared, and he's saying he's seen a lot of mediocrity in managing B2B influencers in the relationship. And so I think it's what can brands do to make sure that there's going to be, at the end, they want strong results. So how can they do a better job at managing the relationship? Yeah. What can they do to get a stronger, better message, et cetera? So I think it goes to some of what we've already discussed.
Okay, so I think the first thing, if we go back to one of the first questions you asked, I believe when you were talking to Alex about a creative brief, number one, starting with organization about what it is you are looking for in content. I also believe that a creator should be able to create, an influencer should be able to create. That's how they became an influencer, is through their creation. But I also believe that it's really important for a brand to be very clear on their market positioning, on the key selling points of their product, any differentiators between their tool and others in the market that are similar. Like all of that needs to be in the hands of the creator so that they can position your solution or product effectively. Ideal situation, they've tried it, they've used it, they think it's cool. That's like best case scenario. The other piece of the puzzle, I think, is communication, right? When I think of my favorite brands to work with, they're prompt, they pay me quickly, they respond to my emails quickly. If by chance I need my post reviewed and approved before I'm posting it, that process is very quick because the best creators work with more than one brand generally. And so we actually do have a behind the scenes posting schedule of like, okay, I'm posting for this brand on this day, I'm posting for this brand on this day. And if I'm asking you to approve my post within your desired time frame, but it's taking you, 5 days to do that, well, now I'm off my schedule, which means now you're off your schedule. So just being aware that an influencer / creator, that's a business essentially. Like that person is legitimately running a business as well. And so brands who respect that and who are timely and communicative and all of those things, that's what's going to build you strong relationships, in my opinion.
Yep. Thanks, Alexis. I appreciate that. Alex, I'll pose it to you and I'll share the question again, and then I'll give a specific example. So Jared's saying he sees a lot of mediocrity in managing the B2B influencer of the actual relationships. So you know this as a B2B influencer, how people approach you, and then that can then you can get incredible results, but sometimes the weakness on the relationship side, that mediocrity, it does end up affecting the results. And I guess what Alexis is saying, and so just to reiterate her point, she was going back to the creative brief. An example that I'll throw out to you, Alex, that I think is very relevant to that we're in RevCon today, is if you think of, as marketers, we're all copywriters. And so if you think of all of the AI tools for writing, the big three are clearly Jasper AI, Copy AI, and Writer AI. And two of them have raised more than 100 million recently. And so, Alex, if you were approached by one of them, I mean, wouldn't you be asking for some of the differentiators, as well as if you could get a trial to make sure that when you write or create creative about one of those tools, that it's going to really sing and work for them and work for your audience? Like, how would you approach that to make sure there's not a mediocre relationship? We might have lost Alex. Chris, do you want to take that question?
Yeah, well, first of all, I hope that as you extend invitations to influencers to work on any of your brands, that using the product is kind of like at a minimum, you're giving them a demo. In the B2B space, specifically SaaS, hopefully maybe not hopefully, there's a good likelihood that the people that you're leaning on to tell your story have some experience with these tools. Without having a strong platform, it's going to feel pretty irrelevant, and you probably won't stick your landing, as the saying goes.
When Chris, and maybe Alexis, you can answer this too. If someone was going to approach you, and do you insist that you get to use the product for at least 30 days, so it's more than a demo, so you get very familiar, and maybe you're familiar with the workflows, and maybe you've tested it on some of your clients? Is that something you do, Chris?
So my relationship with the influence is slightly different. So as our consulting firm, we do deal with 50 plus companies, and we help with their growth operations processes. We find the software that fits our needs first, we vet it, and then we kind of like re-engineer the influencer thing. And we use our influence to find the end customer that we then end the end point is we bring the products into the conversation after we've landed the client. I'm a classic non-traditionalist. In order for us to do that process, we need access to the tools. Just so people can hear like real life experience, we are a certified partner of Rollworks, and we have been a partner for a little over a year. For anybody that knows targeted ads and knows the brand, their platform is very expensive, and it starts out at $1,000 a month. It was one of the first partnerships where we knew the value, but we weren't comfortable because we just, as a company, don't spend the type of ad placement to pay for it. And so I champion the need for a demo platform. Better yet, give me the tool and then I'll use it. We did that, and it's helped the relationship on a lead gen end dramatically. Must have, in my opinion.
Yeah, agreed. Alexis, how would you answer the question?
Yeah, so for me, it depends on the tool. I have a very unique background. So my background started out in sales, actually, and has now pivoted into marketing, obviously. I also handle a lot of sales in our marketing agency. My partner, Brianna, is like the diehard marketing gal who's been doing it for a decade, but my background brings a unique and different skill set. Now, with that said, I also have a background in talent and recruiting. So I get hit up by companies kind of in all of those different realms. And my relationship with their product depends on what the product is. So for example, there is a company called Attention that I have partnered with. And that is not a tool that I use. Like my business is not at the place where we need that tool. However, when I sat down with the founder of the company and when he gave me a demo of the product, I just kept saying, oh my gosh, this is so cool. It is such a great product. And I truly believe that. Like, if I had space for it in my business right now and needed it right this minute, I would purchase that product. I recommended it quietly and personally to a couple of founders who I know, because I thought, wow, this would be really cool for your organization. That type of product I would absolutely and have promoted without using the tool myself day in and day out. Now, another example of a tool that I use and I really like is TextBlaze. And I use that tool. I like it. I also have a partnership with them. So it really just depends on the tool and what it is and how, where I'm at in my business and if it makes sense for me to use it. But I also, having been in different positions, can recognize when a tool would be really, really helpful for people in a particular role. Now, when I work with brands, they're also considering my audience. My audience is largely founders based on roles that I've had in the past. So if you're looking at startups and you're looking at decision makers, more often than not, the founder's going to have a say in what tools their team is using. So that is what I believe that brand is considering when they bring me on as an influencer for their tool.
That's great. And I see that the audience loves attention as well. I have a question for both of y'all, and I'm hoping Alex can return. I hear he's getting booted for internet connections, but he's saying his internet's fine in Circle C. So there's no problems in Austin, Texas, because that's where I am. So the next question I have is from, because you both work with so many SaaS companies and because you both have done B2B influencer deals as the influencer, what are things that make you say, no, I'm not going to take this contract? Say, generally these contracts can be small. And then I'm saying this, not to point out a brand that had said something, some marketing manager said something that maybe was foolish or guidelines you didn't believe in, but how can we create a conversation here about how to make it work with B2B influencers? So do you want to go first, Chris?
Sure. I think it's important to realize that it's a relationship and partnership, as all of them should be, meaning that if you have a product that doesn't work and doesn't add value, it's going to be hard to sell. That's honest. It probably shouldn't be your first out of the gate marketing tactic. Having some level of brand that's available for the Googling and LinkedIn validation that it exists is extremely important. And I approach all partnerships with a growth mindset. Realize that the first time you do this together probably won't be the best you ever do. Iterate and improve and keep open communication. And that's how you develop a strong relationship, period.
Okay.
What would you say, Alexis?
So the question was, why would I say no, right?
Yeah, why would you say no? And then to a SaaS brand that wants you to be the influencer, and then what, if you were going to elaborate, how you would advise any SaaS brand out there to sort of package it in a way.
Yeah. The first is how much they want to pay me. I've been doing this for a couple of years now, and I know my market rate. And if they're not willing to meet that, then unfortunately, this is not a partnership that will work for me. The second is if I take that demo and I'm looking at it going, oh my, I don't know that this is necessarily something that I think is where I should be attaching my name. That's a no. I also have had conversations where the brand was unable to point out their strategic advantage in the market. I'm like, okay, so what makes this different than X? And it was like, well, we've been doing this for 5 years. That's not what I asked you. Like, that's not going to help me sell your product. And so I declined. But, I think realistically speaking, most influencers, they are open. They want to work with really great brands. And so, yeah, I think that having, paying people fairly, again, being very communicative and open, and really being clear on what you're looking for. What do you want out of that relationship with the influencer, is what would get someone to be open-minded and say yes.
Yep, that's great. Alex, the question that we just posed to Alexis is essentially, what would make you say no to a SaaS company that wants you to be their influencer? And then after you answer that, if you could elaborate, what's your recommendation for the SaaS companies watching of how they should maybe approach it so that someone like you wouldn't say no?
Yeah. So this isn't the question, but if Google Fiber came up to me, I'm saying no. The amount of times I just got dropped from this call, I am saying no to them. So that's the first one. The second thing is if they didn't let me be me, if they didn't let me have fun and create in the way I created the content, no one wants to just come like go on whatever platform it is and feel like a square, right? Like I'm trying to create content and create valuable content and create engaging content, and therefore if you're trying to be like no, like we need you to do this, then I'm saying no. Yeah, that and then the second part is like I definitely needed to be a product that I think my audience would find valuable. If I don't want to ruin my reputation and what I built for a check, right? Like that's just not what I'm trying to do. And so therefore, if I don't find it valuable, and like we've had this conversation, Daniel, when people have come to us, we're like, yeah, this is just not a good fit, and like we're not putting that out there. We're not writing that piece of content. We're not writing that ad because like it's not worth it. The long-term benefit of doing that is just not worth it. So those are the two things.
One thing
I have something. Sorry.
Go ahead, Alexis, and then I'll go.
No, I would like to share something that has caused me to sever a relationship with a brand that I had started posting for. If anyone's curious, just throwing this information out there. I was working with the brand. I thought the tool was really cool. I thought my audience would enjoy it, use it, applicable, all of that. And ironically, but not ironically, my now business partner, we were not in business at that point in time, had liked and commented on a post that I had written for this brand. Well, she received an email from the brand with my name and then the two little symbols and company name, as if I was somehow reaching out to talk to her about my post. And in the post, it was actually the brand selling to her and saying, you had, commented on Alexis's post, blah, blah, blah. So that's a hard no for me. You're not going to use my name in your emails without asking me, without consulting me, without having that conversation. And so that was the end of our relationship. That crossed a boundary that I was not having. So please don't ever do that.
Yeah, and I want to share one example. I know we lost Alex again. Thank you, Google Fiber. That a brand approached Alex and his company about an influencer deal, and Alex, is great at crafting copy, and they wanted it in their own corporate speak. And the deal had already been made. Someone had made this deal and handed it to Alex. And so he agreed. And what happened is when, as we've looked at all of the results from the year, the lowest on the totem pole is the one when it's in their corporate speak. And so I think so obviously Alex would now say that's a no. He wouldn't do that going forward. But as a brand, you want to let that influencer write it in their tone, in their voice, so it's genuine, so that their audience, it will resonate with their audience. So Alex has a way of communicating, and the way he crafts sentences, it's very unique to him, and it works for his style. And that brand just missed it, and so the click-through rate was very poor. Chris, you haven't had a chance to answer this.
Boardroom decision, sounds like.
What's that?
Sounds like a boardroom decision.
Yeah, exactly.
It's pretty frequent, right? Like we want to appease the investors or the CEO. And so we all are marketers. Most of us are marketers. Some people are sales, kind of the same thing. And you know the outcome you want, but then you're going to mismatch the toys. It's just kind of a weird way to go about it, but it's very frequent in all sorts of marketing campaigns. Why can't you just throw up an ad and have that turn into your new best customer? Classic problem.
Yeah. I'm looking at some of the questions from the audience here. One of the questions I want to touch on is, what would y'all say, and Alexis, I'll let you answer this first. What's the difference between an influencer and a creator? And y'all actually might have 3 different answers.
That's a great question.
You want Alex to go first?
Well, I feel like creators are like influencers who don't know they're influencers yet, right? A creator is someone who is creating content, and oftentimes, I think the terms are interchangeable, quite frankly. But an influencer, I think, is very purposeful with the content that they're creating. They are working with specific brands with intention, and intending to drive growth for that. I would say, like, I know this is an influencer panel and what have you, but I think a creator is anyone who's posting content. Like, you are a creator, you're creating something. You just don't know it yet, right?
What would you say, Alex?
Yeah, the influencer can influence. And I know that sounds like so obvious to say, but there are a lot of creators who, for example, that create prank videos on YouTube and get millions of views. If they launched a product tomorrow, they are not influencing anybody. If they promoted a product, they're not influencing anybody. But like Alexis said, there are creators who just don't know how to influence yet. And there is a transition there. But yeah, it really comes down to the influencer has built trust where they can then promote something and monetize or help somebody else monetize.
Yeah, like a square rectangle situation, right? So all squares are rectangles, but not all rectangles are squares. I can speak for like myself. I am not the best content creator. For people that like my stuff, it's because it's very genuine. It's usually timely, but the quality of the content isn't great. Thanks, Google Pixel. I actually lean on content creators when I'm trying to up my production value, and it's a very symbiotic relationship. They are artistic and create, and have no influence and often have no idea what I'm talking about. And in the same token, I couldn't even get started trying to create some of the things that they've been able to come up with. So I think they can be different. I think they can also be the same.
I think it's interesting. So Jared said, I've heard people say creators have less followers than influencers. And again, it's like the rectangle square situation, right? Like, if we look at micro influencers, the key is really the engagement, right? It's how much do people trust this person? And like Alex said, how much influence do they have? And that's not necessarily correlated with follower count. I know some creators who have a crap ton, hundreds of thousands of followers, and you look at their engagement rate and it's super, super low. And I know that they have done campaigns with brands because I'm friends with some of them. And, it's like, oh, this one didn't turn out how I had hoped. And it really goes down to, again, it's like, how are you presenting the content? How much influence do you actually have? And the effects of that. And there is such a range. And we're learning this with Influence by Verbatim, right? It's like, how small should we go? Because there are people with really not necessarily massive followings, but you see the engagement, you see the comments, and you see these people who are promoting them elsewhere for free because they just love their work so much. So it is interesting. I don't think it's always necessarily the follower count that is really what a brand should be paying attention to.
Alex, do you want to add more? Because I know you've written a playbook on this.
I will add like one small note, and that is that I think it's more important to look for people who, like Alex saying, don't have followers, but they have fans. There's a big difference between followers and fans, and you want to work with people who have fans because fans they purchase things, they support you, and they actually, they could drive business impact. So there's a big difference. You got to know the difference, and that's where like testing and all those little things could come in. But that's my 2 cents.
That's great. Thank you. I want to throw out another question from the audience. I really love this question. This is from Hannah. I wish I could say Hannah from Queens, but I don't know what city she's in or what borough. So just Hannah. And she's like, how do you get stakeholders on board with B2B influencers? She's like, I've pitched B2B influencers at my company, and I haven't gotten any buy-in to test it. On this question, I kind of want to start with you, Chris, since you're on so many different perspectives, and then go to Alex, and then go to Alexis, if that's okay this time.
Yeah, first, I would definitely label this campaign as experimental. I've owned an agency for 20 years in different forms, and I've always tried to remind the customer that there's almost always like a little treasure box where great leads will come at a low cost. We have to hunt to find said treasure. And so having someone on their team like you that's willing to experiment and themselves out there as the experimenter, hopefully they are appreciating you for even swinging at it. Second, experimental budget, keep it tight, and then know the rules of the game, which is what we're talking about now. Start with a very small handful of influencers. They could even be non-documented influencers. Find out what tools they need to track the job getting done, UTM tracking codes, landing pages, a promotional discount code, and then treat it like an experiment. Let them create their content. What are we seeing? What's working? What's not? And then you're going to hear the word iterate out of my mouth all the time. Iterate. Hopefully that's helpful. Hey, boss, this is an experiment, and I have $10,000, and I'd like to use these 3 influencers for Q4 2023, and I want to see if they can drive some brand awareness and some website traffic. And, you know, God willing, we have a couple of promo codes pop in that validate the cost. And if there's any positive movement, we can scale from there.
I love it. So essentially what you're saying is have a hypothesis and go out and test it. Great. Alex, what would you say? How can someone, really get this B2B stakeholders on board to move forward?
Yeah, I think they have to understand that marketing, there's another way of spelling marketing, and that's TESTING. It is testing, and like you got to think of marketing the same way that you go to a buffet and like you try a ton of things before you go back for seconds and you only get like 1 or 2 things, right? Like and the thought there is you just have to you got to be able to experiment and learn from experiment, and like Chris saying is iterate based on the learnings there. But you have to set aside budgets for testing, right? There's the 80 to 90% of things, depending on like how big your company is, that are going to be the biggest drivers of growth. But that 10% should go to testing different things and setting a KPI and seeing if it hits that KPI. If yes, like scale, optimize and scale, and continuously do that.
Alexis, now it's your turn. Sorry, you went last on this.
Yay. Okay. So I think for me, my strategy is hit them with logic, right? So you figure everybody has an advertising budget, or they should, right? So if an average LinkedIn ad CPM is, $30, what if now your CPM cost goes way down, but your reach gets extended 3 to 5 times, right? So it's kind of hard to argue with that. If you're like, okay, listen, if you're going to spend, $5,000 on LinkedIn ads, what if we did our test and we took that? And if I'm telling you, based on the influencers that I have selected for you, based on their audience, based on their follower count, based on their average number of impressions, based on their engagement, then I'm going to get you 3 to 5 times the reach and results that this ad potentially does for our company. How could you say no to that? Why wouldn't you want to try that? It's a very logical argument.
Yeah, I love that. I love the logic. I have a question for y'all that's not from the audience. This one's from me. And I personally know that Alex loves this tool called Notion that you probably all know. And what a B2C brand would do, right? A B2C brand might post something on Twitter or Instagram that they're looking for people that, let's just say, love Skittles. I'm not a Skittles fan. My kids love Skittles, but whatever. And so what would you recommend, let's just say for someone like Notion, if Notion wanted to do a B2B campaign with influencers and find the Alex, should they take a page from B2C brands like a Skittles? What would y'all do? And I'll start with you, Alexis, this time, then go to Alex and then to Chris.
Can you do me a second? I was looking at Jared being my promoter here in the chat.
Okay, Alex, you're up since you love Notion.
So what campaign would they do?
Well, not only what
the question,
but if you think about, let's say there's a marketing manager, they're a VP of marketing, and they're like, what would really kill it for us? If we could find people that are fanatical about Notion, that love it. like you do, where you want your whole life in Notion, right? I don't know if you have everything about Baby Zara in there. And so how could they find people like you, and what would you say to get someone like that into a B2B campaign? So we'll go with you first, then Chris, then Alexis.
Sure. The easiest is like, who's already making content about Notion? There's so many people on YouTube creating Notion templates and Notion tutorials and all those kinds of folks. It's like, that is the easy. They would love to work with Notion, and they'll create the best content around Notion better than anybody at Notion. And so my first suggestion is find the exact people who are creating content around that tool, and figure out ways to work with them on, like we talked about previously, but like a test campaign, and then if it works, scale it, right? Like that's another thing that I like Ridge Wallet and how they approach influencers. They start deals with like 3 to 5 videos with every influencer, and they work with a ton of YouTube influencers. If it works and they hit their goals, they scale to 10 to 15 videos and then annual contracts, right? And that is their most profitable channel. So yeah, and so my take there is like, find exactly who is already talking about your tool, whether that's on Twitter, whether that's on YouTube, on a podcast, and figure out a way to work with them.
Chris, you're up next.
He nailed it. That's the best way to do it. And, Daniel dropped the Apollo plug. For all of us in SaaS, we are probably all very aware how fast and quickly Apollo took over the market when it comes to data enrichment and email engagement. Shameless plug. That's how they found growth, and they found me. I would talk about the tools. It's second nature. I love to share my story, and I love when things work out. Daniel and Apollo found probably dozens of me's, reached out, had that personal connection, and in 15 minutes, we started working together more. Find your fans.
Yep. Alexis, what would you say?
Yeah, and I mean, to piggyback off of find your fans. So like, for example, I work with the brand Teal, and Teal didn't find me. I found Teal. I really like Teal. I recommended it to my customers, and I was looking actually for an affiliate link. So I reached out to them and I said, hey, do you have an affiliate program? They were smart, and they looked at my content, and they looked at what I did, and they looked at how many followers I had, and they said, we absolutely have an affiliate link, but would you also consider working with us as an influencer? And I was like, heck yeah, I would love to. That would be amazing. So pay attention to the inbounds, right? Like it's not always you having to seek people out. There are people who love your product and your service and who will make themselves known. And I mean, there's B2C brands that I absolutely love as well, that I like, if all day long, if they asked me to do a paid post for them, I would be like, hell yeah, yes. And I would probably do it in trade, right? Like free, whatever. And I'll talk about you. Like, of course, I love you guys.
That's awesome.
Maybe we should consider brands that maybe don't have like the brand influence yet, where people are raving about them on LinkedIn, and that can be difficult. So as just an alternative lane, if that is you, maybe find some people that you are engaging with on LinkedIn or Instagram or whatever platform you feel most invested in, and then approach them authentically and say, hey, we're looking to get into the influencer game. I love what you're doing. Here's why. And then go back to what I had said previously, have a budget, have a plan, keep it an open-ended conversation, and iterate. I don't think anybody with a positive attitude and a decent product would be pushed away aggressively if they approached anyone in that sort of tone.
Love it. That's great. I see a question here. I feel like we've answered this, but I just want to reiterate. I want to ask the question, pose it again, and make sure that we've answered it thoroughly. So being asked here, how can we get brands to open up their budgets for B2B influencers? And saying that most B2B brands are just still unwilling to invest. I feel like we've touched on this, but maybe we could take it a step further. Alexis talked about earlier the CPMs and seeing how you can get outside results. And, and Alex did too. Is there anything else that y'all would add to that question? And I'll start with you, Chris. So that Alexis,
I think there's a real reality for the testing mechanism of it. And I think that anybody on the board or, a senior leader at your company would love to see your brand in someone else's mouth. So if there's, maybe don't do this, but if you could disguise your first round of this as something else, and then you can have them pick up their phone and look on your LinkedIn page and see this person navigating the screen and saying, hey, I did this, this, and this, and I got this result, that would change their tune. Seeing is believing. So yeah, maybe that's another option to get people buy-in. Oh yeah, I totally spent an extra $10,000 last quarter on Google ads. Well worth it. And then whip out the video.
What would you say, Alex?
Yeah, I think it's like one of those things where have a competition, like a small competition of like, what is our what channel gives us our best quality lead, and what's the price of that? And can we run a test and see if we can match it or beat it? If yes, like invest in it. Just like if I spend $1,000 here versus $1,000 there, like what comes from that? And that could teach you so much. But completely ignoring something is just bad marketing, in my opinion. That's what it is.
Alex, do you want to?
Other problems? You know.
Can I get you to share
Yeah.
an example, a specific example from last month where you crafted a beautiful custom case study about this innovative email tool? And when you shared that case study on Twitter, your audience went crazy for it, and it got them a ton of leads, which they were very happy with the MRR behind those leads. And they were saying it's all from Twitter. So do you want to sort of unpack that?
Yeah, the main part of that was like, actually this company didn't believe in any promotional stuff. Like, we have somebody that kind of works with us and they also work at that company, so like we kind of got a backdoor of like, hey, let's run a test. And it took a lot of convincing, and we ran a test. And so we read a custom case study in Marketing Exam. So like that's my newsletter. And then I took that same custom case study and we ran it as a piece of educational content on Twitter. It drove, I think it was over 1,200 clicks, and overall 120 plus demos, and like 500 K in ARR. So it's like from a small test, like again, like this is like one of those, it's like a crazy campaign, but that came from a test. Like that is a wild learning to take from a test, from somebody that was like, no, we're not going to run performance marketing. We're not going to run paid ad. Like, we're not going to do any of this. And then they're like, oh shit, like we should, And so now they're changing what they're doing in Q4 and Q1 because of one small test. So it's important to test the waters,
And that was
especially if you really want to grow.
And that was in the last 30 to 60 days, where a lot of people would say Twitter's dead and it's no longer a platform to invest in.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. Alexis, up to you.
Okay, so I'm going to approach this from a different perspective, which is if you are hiring people to, let's say it's a startup. Let's say you have one head of marketing, which means they do everything. You are hiring that person because you believe that they have the skills, knowledge, and expertise to guide you in the right direction in your marketing efforts. That's the first piece. The second piece is you have a budget. Okay, so your budget's, I'm going to go big here and say $1 million, right? That budget is the same budget. The question becomes, where are you putting that money? Where is that money being invested? And if that person that you hired to guide, direct, and share their expertise with you is saying that a piece of that $1 million should be invested in influencer marketing because of XYZ, and they're a marketer, so they're going to bring you statistics, they're going to bring you reasons, they're going to bring you a logical argument, for word's sake, of why you should be doing this, I believe that you should trust their expertise. Now, with that said, if you're not comfortable, start small. I'm not saying you need to take 500,000 of that $1 million and all of a sudden go put that into influencer marketing. But what I am saying is take a piece and see how it performs. Because ultimately, you're shooting yourself in the foot if you're unwilling to try new things in marketing. Marketing is all about trial and error. It's all about new developments in the market. Consumers consume differently depending on the year, depending on the economy, depending on this, depending on that. And so if we've always done it this way, so this is what we're going to do, you're not going to grow. And you just wasted however much that marketer's salary is if you're not going to trust their expertise. So that's my holistic approach to all of this. And it really stems from trusting the people that you bring in to do the job.
Great answer, Alexis. I'd now like to go around to everyone and making sure that we're really sharing valuable resources for the audience. And so maybe you have one resource to share, maybe you have three, and just sort of open it up. So on the B2C side, I think a lot of people know what the major tools are for brands to utilize. I think on the B2B side, people are still learning. So I'll start with you again, Chris, and then we'll go to Alexis.
Happy
And then we'll go
to.
to
So
Huh?
we'll talk about influencer enablement. And so when we talk about landing pages, campaigns, and UTM tracking codes, I would strongly recommend a HubSpot Marketing Pro play. Create your template, clone in seconds. If you need any help, I'm Chris from Growth, and I'm happy to help. No, but HubSpot is a really great tool for this exact use case.
That's why Dharmesh loves you right there. Okay, Alex, you're next.
Yeah, I mean, I gotta go with Chris. Like, we love HubSpot. Like our tool stack is fairly simple. It's HubSpot, it's Notion, it's Slack. From trying to think from like that's basically our tech stack. Like, there's nothing fancy there. Apollo, we obviously use Apollo as well. That's phenomenal. Loom's phenomenal. But yeah, our tool stack is pretty simple.
The Alexis, I'll ask you the question, but I'll also ask if one of your clients said, we're looking to find, let's say, a dozen to 24 B2B influencers, what tool would you utilize? So maybe broaden it a bit or make it more specific.
I would use Influence by Verbatim. That's literally what we do. We match influencers with brands, given their goals, given their background, given what subjects they speak about. Everyone is vetted. You're not going to have, someone asked earlier about the crazy political posts. You're not going to have that with the influencers that we work with. But I think, from a tools perspective, I think that communication is really key. And Alex brought up using Notion. There are a lot of brands that do use Notion. They have their docs on there. They're easy to disseminate. They're easy to update. Slack channels for various campaigns are also very, very helpful. If you have a group of influencers who are working on a campaign together, that can be really helpful. But I think, finding the right tools for the right place of where you are is the way to go. Like, you don't need to build this incredible infrastructure to do a trial influencer campaign, so start small, see what works. As Chris likes to say, iterate, grow, all of those fun things, and your tech stack can grow with you.
Wonderful. That's great.
Amazing, guys. This has been an absolutely incredible session. We are almost at time, so we will have to wrap. Make sure that all of our participants in the audience find these guys on LinkedIn. Guys, feel free to drop in your LinkedIn URL. So if people have questions afterwards, feel free to reach out to all of us. Thank you so much to our amazing speakers, Daniel, Alexis, Alex, and last but not least, Christopher, for covering B2B influencers, which have really shown that it really is a double-edged sword. Be sure to tune in for our next session with Orla Clifford. She's covering 5 things RevOps teams should know during planning season. So definitely don't want to miss out on that one. But again, thank you so much to everybody. We hope you guys have a wonderful afternoon, and thanks for joining in with us for RevCon 2023. Thanks, guys. See ya.
See ya.